Chapter 1 of 6 Little Girls. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 6 Little Girls by Pansy. Chapter 1. 2 of them were in a pretty room dressing for church. They were sisters, Ida and Nora Warren. Ida stood before the glass, combing out some snarly brown curls and winding them over her finger. Then they fell in puffy little curls and rested on her shoulders. Nora sat on the foot of the bed, one foot curled under her, while she buttoned the boot on the other one. "I wonder if Maynie is dressed yet," Ida said, pulling out a wicked little snarl of hair by the roots. "I just wonder how she feels. I should think it would be awful to do what she has got to." "So should I," said Nora, talking with her buttoner in her mouth while she put on the other boot. "Just think of standing up there in that big church before all the people and answering questions and having your name spoken right out so everybody could hear. Oh my, I never could do it." "She doesn't have to answer questions," said Ida. "She just has to bow her head." "Well, that is answering. I should not know when to bow and when to keep my head still, and I should not know a word the minister said. I should just be all of a tremble, and my face would be as red as a beet. Oh, I should never think of doing it. It's well I ain't good, and I don't believe I ever will be, if I have got to join the church." "Now, seems to me I should rather like it," Ida said, twisting a curl until it was smaller and longer than the others, and standing back to admire it. "There's something nice, after all, about standing up there and having the people look at you, and you all fixed up pretty, and folks wondering how old you are and whose little girl you are. That part of it would be real fun." "Why, Ida Warren, it's wicked to have fun about such things." "I ain't having any fun, and I'm not doing the things. I'm only saying that it would be nice, that part of it. I shouldn't mind it." "What part would you mind, then?" "Why, the afterward, having to be good all the time. People expecting you to be better than any of the girls because you joined the church, and the girls watching you and seeing if you behaved any better and all that. I should just hate it. And I'd act worse than I did before. I know I should." Just then Mother Warren came to say that it was real late, and she was surprised that they were not dressed, and that they must hurry as fast as they could and not talk any more. Exactly across the street from their house lived Nettie Hudson. She was dressing for church and talking to Jane, the kitchen girl, while she had her dress fastened. "Why don't you go to our church today? Some little girls and a boy are going to join the church, and they stand up before all the people and get talked to, and you can see them all the time." "And do they dress all in white and have white veils?" "Why, no, they don't dress in white, such cold weather as this, and little girls never wear veils in church." "They do in our church," Jane said positively, "and they look perfectly splendid. You ought to go to our church." Nettie stood still while her sash was being tied and looked thoughtful. Pretty soon she said, "I'd like to be dressed up in white and wear a white veil and look lovely." "Of course you would," Jane said heartily. "I'll take you to our church to see the girls some day if your mother will let you." Nettie said no more about it, but she thought a great deal. She had heard that Jane's church was not the best kind of a church, and that Jane was thought to have made a mistake in her religion, but she made up her little mind that a place where they dressed up little girls in such a lovely way could not be very bad, and that she meant to go to it the first chance she got. Then she began to wonder if her cousin Fanny was ready for church, and ended by deciding to walk on ahead and stop at Uncle Frank's for Fanny. Fanny Shepherd was up in her room hunting for her gloves when Nettie came, and she had to be waited for. The reason she was not ready was that she had stood around talking with her mother. This was the way the talk began. "Mother, Maynie Thorne is 6 months younger than I am, and she is going to join the church today. I should think I was about old enough to join too." "It isn't about being old, child, that makes people ready to join the church." "Well, no, of course not. They have to try to be good and all that. But I am sure I am willing to try to be as good as I can. I should think I was as much ready as Maynie Thorne." "I don't know anything about Maynie Thorne. I think myself she is too young to know what she is about. I don't believe in children meddling with things that they don't understand. But she isn't my child, and I don't have to manage her." "Well, mother, when I am 13, I suppose I will be old enough, won't I?" "How foolishly you talk, Fanny. How do I know whether you will be old enough? It will depend on how you behave. What makes you so anxious to join the church? Just because Maynie is going to?" "Oh, I don't know. She is always taking the lead in things, getting ahead of us girls, you know, and I don't like her to get ahead in everything." Mrs. Shepherd sighed. "You show plainly enough that you don't understand what you are talking about," she said. "People join the church because they need the help of the church, not to show themselves or get ahead of others." Fanny looked more puzzled than ever. "If it helps them," she said, "I should think you would want me to join. I think I ought to be helped as well as Maynie Thorne." "Oh, nonsense," said Mrs. Shepherd. "What is the use of talking with you? I tell you, child, you are too young to understand anything about it. You shouldn't talk about such things till you have some idea what they mean. I suppose Maynie Thorne knows just as much about it as you do. No child of mine shall take a step until she is old enough to know what she is doing." Now Maynie Thorne, about whom all these people were talking, was not a bit happy. The reason was because it rained. She had planned to wear her new brown cashmere dress and her blue sash, but the day was so gloomy and rainy that mother had said, "Your navy blue suit will be just the thing to wear this morning, daughter." "That old thing!" Maynie said, and made her great blue eyes look large, and the lids drooped over them in a way that meant, "I am astonished at you, mother." "Yes," said mother firmly, "just the thing." "But, mother, you said yesterday you thought it was getting short." "I said it would be before spring, I was afraid, and there was no chance to make it longer. It is plenty long enough just now. We are far away from spring." "Mother, I don't want to go to church at all if I have to wear that old dress that I have worn so many times. All the girls know that I have a new brown cashmere, and they expect me to wear it." "Maynie, are you going to church today for the purpose of showing your new brown cashmere dress?" Mrs. Thorne's voice was so very grave that Maynie blushed away up to her brown hair, but she said, "Why, mother, of course not. But I can't help wanting to look decent. Why can't I wear my brown one just as well?" "For one reason, it rains, and the rain will spot it. It isn't necessary to get it spotted today when you have a dress that will do. I am sure you must think I know what is decent, and that I would not dress you in a way that was not proper." "But, mother, I could wear my waterproof. It will cover me all up." "Don't you remember that your waterproof is away from home? Didn't you lend it to Aunt Laura for Raynor the other night?" "Sure enough. Well, mother, couldn't Rachel just run around there and get it for me? Because you see I can't wear that blue dress. It doesn't match in the least with the blue of my sash. They look just horrid together." Mrs. Thorne arose suddenly from her chair. "We will not talk about it any more," she said. "You are showing a very naughty spirit. You forget that Rachel is in as much haste as you are. The blue dress is the proper one to wear on such a day as this, and must be worn if you go at all. The way in which you talk almost makes me think it would be better for you not to go." And then she went out of the room. Maynie went to work getting dressed, but she did not get back her pleasant face, and she muttered a little at the blue dress as she put it on, and when her sister looked sober at her, she said, "Well, I don't care. It does seem too mean that it should rain today." As for Rachel, she was the little girl who helped in the kitchen. She was going to church too, and she hurried with the dishes and the sweeping that morning, and put on her neat blue calico without trimming on it, and was ready before Maynie was. So now you have made the acquaintance of every one of my 6 little girls, and I have a good deal to tell you about them. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. In the course of time, the 6 little girls were all in their seats in the great handsome church. Maynie Thorne sat between her mother and her Aunt Louise, and she couldn't help wishing she had a pair of tan-colored kids like Aunt Louise's. They were so pretty. Thinking of them, she began to look at her own. They wrinkled, were too large, and they had a rip on one finger and a worn-off spot on another. She began to work at them, trying to make the wrinkles stay out. Then she took out her handkerchief and rubbed at the worn spot to see if she could not make it look darker and so show less. Pretty soon her mother nudged her with her elbow and shook her head at her. Then Maynie remembered that she had lost the text and had no idea how the sermon commenced. After that she really tried to listen, for a while at least, till she happened to turn a little to the left and saw the Warren girls had their new suits on. That made her think of her blue dress again, and it honestly looked so shabby to her that she couldn't help thinking the people would all notice it when the time came for her to go up front. On the whole, she heard quite as little of that sermon as any mortal child, with ears and common sense, could have managed to hear. When the time came for her to go out into the aisle, with some older ones and with Rachel, the little girl who helped in the kitchen, she was very much frightened, and looked at her mother and at Aunt Louise, and hung back, and almost felt that she could not go. I am not sure that she would, if Hannah had not walked along in such a grave and quiet way, as if she had forgotten that anybody was looking at her. That made Maynie feel a little ashamed, and so she went. The minister read out of a book to them, and there were many hard words in it. Maynie, what with her embarrassment, and her fear lest her dress really looked shabby, and her confusion lest she might say or do something wrong, found it hard work to listen, and felt that she did not understand at all what it was about. "Oh dear," she said to herself, "I don't know in the least what all that reading means, and I don't know when to bow nor anything. I wonder if I ought to join the church. I feel dreadfully afraid that I am not good enough. Dr. Dennis didn't talk so to me when I went to his study to see him. He just asked me if I loved Jesus well enough to try to do as he told me every day. That is easy to understand, and I told him I meant to try, and I do mean to, but I don't understand what he is reading." Neither, I am afraid, did Hannah. The words were certainly very large and hard, many of them. But if Maynie had not been so busy with her own thoughts, she would have discovered what Hannah did, that there was, every now and then, a sentence that was simple and plain. Hannah knew she meant what they talked about, and when she bowed her head, she did it with real earnest intention to do all that she understood, and to find out as fast as she could what the rest meant. As for Maynie, I am afraid that when that time came, she had got herself so mixed up and confused that she only bowed because the rest did, without having much idea of what she was promising. At last the service closed, and then our 6 little girls gathered into their class in Sabbath school. Miss Gilmore was their teacher. Maynie and Rachel were objects of special interest to every one of the others. They looked at them curiously, as though they expected to see some wonderful difference in them. At first they did not say a word, but finally, while Mr. Stewart was praying, Fanny Shepherd whispered, "Weren't you awfully frightened?" "Yes, I was," whispered back Maynie. "Didn't I look so?" "Yes, your cheeks were awful red." By this time, Ida Warren, hearing the whispering, peeped between her fingers, and seeing that it was Maynie, took courage and asked, "Why didn't you wear your brown dress? Isn't it done?" "Yes, indeed it is, and it is just lovely, but mother wouldn't let me wear it because it rained. Wasn't it mean that it should rain today?" Here Miss Gilmore peeped between her fingers and shook her head at the whisperers. That made Maynie's cheek grow very red indeed. She knew well enough that it was wrong to whisper in prayer time. No use in pretending that she did not understand that. "I do wish they would let me alone," she said to herself, "and not whisper to me all the time. They don't bother Rachel." This last she put in because she could not help seeing that Rachel had not once raised her head nor moved her hand from before her eyes. When it was time for the lesson, Miss Gilmore said, "I was sorry to hear whispering in my class during prayers, and to see that some of those, from whom we have a right to expect better things, were among the whisperers." This did not make Maynie feel any better. She was very much ashamed. How unfortunate it was that she should be the first one whom Miss Gilmore asked a question. "Maynie," she said, "what is the golden text today?" Now the truth was that Maynie hadn't the least idea what the golden text was. She had meant to study her lesson. She had thought about it every day that week and said to herself, "I will surely study it tomorrow." And the last tomorrow had come, but she did not get to the lesson. It was very mortifying not to know it. "I can't remember the golden text," she said. She did not mean to tell what was not true, but it sounded so much better to say, "I can't remember it," than to say, "I haven't learned it." Surely that wasn't a story. In fact, Maynie was so used to that way of talking that it never occurred to her that she said anything but the truth. "Who will repeat the golden text?" said Miss Gilmore. Then 5 of the girls looked at each other. Some of them were confused, and some felt silly. It was evident that not one of them could repeat it. Several of them began to laugh as if it were a very funny thing, though, to do them justice, the most of them felt very much ashamed. None more so than Maynie. "Can Rachel say it?" Miss Gilmore asked kindly. Rachel sat at the very end of the seat, a little apart from the rest. Her blue calico dress looked so very different from the others that she felt almost as if she did not belong to the same world, and ought not to sit on the same seat. But her face brightened a little. She knew the golden text, every word of it. She said it over slowly and clearly, every syllable distinct. "Good," said Miss Gilmore. "I am glad I have one scholar who has her lesson. Maynie, I cannot see that there is anything to laugh at." For Maynie was by this time so much embarrassed and so little able to control herself that she was laughing hysterically over something silly that Ida Warren whispered to her. "We expect a better example from you, Maynie," her teacher added, and she spoke very gravely. She did not know that Maynie felt very much ashamed of herself. This sentence from her teacher made the blood rush all over Maynie's cheeks and stopped her laughing. "It isn't wicked to laugh, is it, Miss Gilmore, because I have joined the church?" This was what she said. I don't think she had an idea of how very rudely it was going to sound until after she had said it. Then she felt very much frightened at the sound of her own words, and wondered what her mother would have thought of her if she had heard. As for Miss Gilmore, she didn't know what to think. "I am afraid," she said to Miss Wallace, as they were walking home after Sunday school, "I am afraid that Maynie Thorne hasn't the least idea what she is about in joining the church today. I never saw her behave worse than she did in Sabbath school. She whispered in prayer time and laughed at everything, and when I reproved her she was very rude and pert." Mrs. Shepherd lay on the lounge after she came home and talked to her grown-up daughter. "That child, Maynie Thorne, is no more fit to unite with the church than a kitten is. It is distressing to see children made to assume a false position in that way. I couldn't help watching her in church, and if she didn't pay more attention to her gloves and her embroidered handkerchief and her neighbor's clothes than to anything else, I am mistaken. She is a vain little thing anyway. They dress her up so, it is no wonder." Now in her own little room that night, Maynie Thorne, in her white nightdress, knelt down in the moonlight, weeping bitter tears. She knew she had dishonored Jesus that day. She knew she had not been attentive in church, and had been irreverent and rude in Sunday school, and in 100 ways had been a false witness of the dear Lord Jesus. So she cried as she prayed. "Oh, Jesus," she said, "I do love thee, and I want to be thy child, and I think I am, but I am so naughty, and I forget so much. I have been worse today than I ever was, and I meant to be better." And the blessed Lord Jesus, looking into her heart, saw she was really sorry, and he whispered, "Dear child, I forgive you. Try again." But Mrs. Shepherd and Miss Gilmore could not see her heart, and they kept on thinking that she was a naughty child who knew nothing about Jesus and did not belong to him. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3. It was Saturday morning, just after breakfast. Maynie Thorne was upstairs in her room, brushing her hair and getting out a clean white apron, getting ready in some haste to go out on the street. She had a plan for the morning, an idea, she called it, that had come to her in the night. She meant to get up a meeting, just for the little girls, not a sewing society like that silly thing we had last summer, she said to herself with a curling lip. We quarreled half the time about that, and now we will have something that is worthwhile, a prayer meeting and a Bible reading. I can get up Bible readings as well as anybody. I know hundreds of verses that could be put into one. We can meet every Saturday afternoon. There are ever so many girls who I think would come, and it would be doing a great deal of good. I am sure it is a splendid idea. I wish Mother would let me ask Rena Nelson. She doesn't like me to play with her, but I'm sure I might ask her to come to meeting. I ought to try to do her good if she doesn't behave well. That is all the more reason why she ought to come to prayer meeting. I mean to coax Mother to let me ask her, but then I am afraid if I do, the Morton girls won't come, for they don't like her a bit. It is queer that one can't do so little a thing as have a prayer meeting without there being troublesome things coming in to be planned and settled. Well, never mind, it will all come out some way. I mean to go around this very morning and see how many I can get to come. I don't know who to ask to go with me. Ida Warren would go, I suppose, but she doesn't care anything about meetings. I'm afraid she wouldn't coax them to come. I believe I shall have to go alone. There isn't a single girl of my age who cares anything about such things. Only Rachel. This last name was added after a pause and with some hesitation. Then Maynie said positively, "She can't go, of course. She hasn't time, and if she had, how funny it would be. I suppose she will want to come to the meetings. I wonder what the girls will say to that." "Maynie," called a voice at the foot of the stairs. "Yes, ma'am," answered Maynie. It was her mother's voice, and she stepped into the hall to see what was wanted. "Where are you, child?" her mother said. "What are you doing? Hurry down. I want you to help Rachel this morning. We have a great deal to do and shall need your help all the morning." I don't know that you can imagine what a frown this made come all over Maynie's pretty face. What an upsetting of her plans! Take off her white ruffled apron, tie on her old brown one, and go down to that horrid kitchen and wipe dishes while Rachel washed them. "Oh, mother," she said, "can't Rachel get along without me? I wanted to go out and see the girls about something that is real important." "The girls will have to wait, Maynie. It is important to get the Saturday's baking done, and I need your help in a dozen ways. When you are at school all the week, you ought to be willing to help a little on Saturday." Maynie didn't like to say any more to her mother, but she said it to the apron as she slowly took it off and hung it in the clothes press. "I think it is just too bad. What is the use of trying to do any good in the world? Some horrid work comes in to spoil it all. Just as if Rachel couldn't wipe those dishes without my help. It is all she knows how to do, and I should think I might have a chance to work at something that was worth doing. The kitchen is so hot, too, on Saturday. I shall be sure to get a headache, and that will be the last of my plans for the day. I wanted to get up a meeting for this very afternoon, and now I can't. I do think mother ought to give me a chance to do such work as that." Now, after saying all that to the listening apron, and forgetting that one who could hear her was really listening, of course Maynie did not carry a pleasant face to the kitchen. In fact, it was a long time before she reached there, so that her mother's first words were, "Really, Maynie, I could have got ready to go to the city in this time. Now make haste and see how much you can help us." But Maynie didn't make haste. She moved very slowly indeed, with the frown on her fair face growing deeper every minute. "Don't put your wet dishes over here where the drained ones are," she said to Rachel, speaking so sharply that Rachel started and looked half frightened. "I should think you had washed dishes long enough to know better than that. There, you have dripped your greasy dishwater right on those plates that I have just dried." No word from Rachel, though she looked as though there were several she might say if she thought it best. Maynie went on with the dishes, grumbling at Rachel with almost every breath. She washed too fast, or she kept her waiting, or the dishwater was too cold, or it burned her fingers, and the rattling that she kept up among those dishes was very trying to the mother's nerves. At last it ended in a crash. Down went the large platter on the floor and broke in 3 pieces. "That was your fault, Rachel Stone. You hit my elbow. I know you did, and I believe you did it on purpose." Rachel looked utterly dismayed. "Why, Miss Maynie," she said, "I didn't hit you. I stood way over here, and I wasn't looking your way at all." "I shouldn't think you were. Probably you can't see in the daytime. Anyway, you pushed my elbow and made me drop it." "2 children together," said Mrs. Thorne with a sigh, as she came from the pantry and tried to inquire into the cause of the mischief. "I might have known better. Maynie, you may wash your hands and go in the dining room and rub the silver." Now generally Maynie liked that work. It was so pleasant to see the spots all go off, and the spoons and forks growing bright in her hands. But this morning she had something of importance to do, you know. "Oh, mother," she said, "need I do it this morning? I want to go out so badly. It is on business." "You may do it at once," her mother said, speaking very coldly. "You are getting too anxious to spend your time with the girls, and none of it at home. The afternoon is long enough for amusement. This morning you are to help, and I don't want to hear another word about it." Dear me, what a morning that was! I am almost sure Mrs. Thorne was glad for her own sake when it was nearly noon, and she could dismiss her sullen, slamming little daughter with directions to get ready for dinner. I am afraid you will think that Maynie knew very little when I tell you that she actually did not see, all that morning, how tight a hold Satan had got of her, and how he was using that prayer meeting to help her do mischief. It was a hungry little bird, at last, who taught her a lesson. When her hands were washed and her white apron on again, she found that there was no time for anything before dinner except to feed a birdie who kept hopping over the piazza roof. She went to the kitchen for breadcrumbs, and when she came back, don't you think there was not only a bird, but a mouse waiting for dinner? "Oh, you horrid little mouse," she said, "do you suppose I am going to feed you? If I had a trap, I would set it and catch you. I don't see what you are made for anyway. Horrid, hateful thing. Ugh!" Just then a curious thought came to Maynie. She remembered who made the mouse. No one but God could have done it. It was just as surely his work as the dear little singing bird was. How very strange, the great God taking time to make a mouse. What had that to do with the dishes in the kitchen or the spots on the silver? Why, a great deal, as Maynie presently thought. How silly it had seemed to be obliged to take the time that she meant to have spent in arranging for a prayer meeting, in doing such common work as that. And yet here is the God of heaven and earth, taking time from his wonderful works to give breath and life to a mouse. She leaned out of the window and stared at her two callers, with a sad and troubled face. She began to see how silly, how sinful she had been. How very much ashamed she felt. The end of that long thinking was, she went down on her knees and asked the dear Lord Jesus to forgive her for the mistake she had made and the sin she had led herself into. Then she went straight to Rachel and said, "I'm sorry I was so awful cross. I thought you hit my elbow, but I am not sure. And even if you did, I know you didn't mean to." But there was one woman in that kitchen that morning, Mrs. Brown, the woman who came to scrub and clean for Saturday, who went home and said, "I thought Maynie Thorne didn't know what she was about when she joined the church last week. She is the most disagreeable child at home I ever saw. Why, if she had been my girl, I would have whipped her today as sure as the world. Pretty way for a church member to act." That was true enough. And yet Mrs. Brown was a church member herself, and was very cross and disagreeable all that afternoon. I wonder who was watching her. "Ye are my witnesses, saith the Lord." End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4. 5 of them were in a great flutter. They met at Maynie's on Saturday afternoon to talk over the last new plan, which was to have a tableau entertainment and charge 10 cents admission, the money to be used toward the new organ that was to be bought when enough money was raised. The little girls thought they could earn almost enough with their tableaus. There was a perfect babel of tongues. 5 tongues, when they all go at once, can make a good deal of noise. "We must pick out all our pictures first, and then all our characters." This was Maynie's direction. "We shall have to have more girls in it than just us," said Fanny Shepherd. "Of course, and we'll have to let some of the boys help too. But then we are the leaders, and the rest have got to do just as we say, because we thought about it first and are having all the trouble and responsibility." And Maynie's face shone as if she thought that trouble and responsibility were 2 very delightful things. "Let's have a lovely bride for one tableau," Ida Warren said. We can dress one up so beautifully. Mamma has a lovely white dress she will let me take, and Aunt Laura can make the most exquisite wreaths of flowers." "You shall be a bride then," Maynie said, and Ida was delighted. But her sister Nora was not. She looked very sober. "I don't know about that," she said. "You are the youngest. I don't think Mamma would like to have you dressed up as a bride." "Why, she is only 2 years younger than you," said all the girls except Ida, and she said, "Pshaw, as if Mother would care. It is nothing but play." "2 years makes a good deal of difference sometimes," Nora said, tossing her brown head and looking very dignified. Then every one of them laughed. "It doesn't make you old enough to be truly married," Fanny Shepherd said, "and Ida might as well play it as anybody." "Well, I'm sure I don't want to be truly married nor to play it either, so you needn't laugh. There is nothing to laugh at." This Nora said, with her cheeks so red that she looked just a trifle angry. Then Nettie Hudson's soft voice, "Mother said we would quarrel before we had been together half an hour and break up in a fuss. I wonder if we shall." "Of course we won't," Maynie said briskly. She had no idea of being broken up. "I'll tell you what it is, girls," she added in a businesslike voice. "We must have a secretary who shall sit at the table and write down the names of those we select, and who shall take them. Then we'll know what we are about." This sounded interesting, but the question was, who should be secretary? Every single one of them wanted the office, so each one objected to whoever was chosen. "Let's have the oldest," said Maynie at last. "There is no other way to decide it, as I see." She knew she was the oldest. "Oh, no," Fanny Shepherd said quickly. She knew she wasn't the oldest. What a queer way that would be to do. People never care whether secretaries are old or young, if they can only write. Let's vote who shall have it. We must each take a slip of paper and write the name of the one we want, and lay them all in the middle of the table. Then I will read them, and the one that gets the most votes shall be the secretary." To this they agreed. It took some time for each to get settled with a pencil. Then they nibbled the ends of them and looked wise and perplexed, as if they could not decide on what to do, and finally went to writing. A queer thing happened. When the votes were read, each girl had 1 vote, and not a single one of them had more. "Oh dear, what shall we do?" they said, laughing. "Let's pick out 2 girls, and each promise to vote for one or the other," said Nettie Hudson. "Oh no," said they all. "That would make some of us vote for ourselves." So they talked and argued and thought of ways, and were not suited with them, until Nora Warren said, "Well, I knew it would be just so. Here it is almost time to go home, and we haven't done a thing." "I know a way," Maynie said. "Lay all the papers back again in a heap, bottom side up. Then the oldest can put out her hand and take one paper, and whatever name is on it shall be our secretary." To this, after much talking and some objections, all finally agreed, and Fanny Shepherd was the name picked up first. So with much satisfaction, Fanny seated herself at the table with a sheet of paper ready to be a secretary if she should ever have anything to write. "Now we must work fast," said Nora Warren. "Let's have Evangeline." "Oh no, that's too old for us. That's too hard. People have had that so many times." These were some of the objections. "Well, what shall we have? Can't we get up a gypsy tableau? I saw a lovely one once. They had a fire made with alcohol." 3 heads were shaken decidedly. "My mother would never let me be in such a tableau," Nettie Hudson said decidedly. "Why not?" "'Cause fire is dangerous." "Poh, no, it isn't either. I guess we could manage a little alcohol." "No, we couldn't. Our mothers wouldn't let us," Fanny Shepherd said, looking up from her paper. "Come, girls, do work. There will be nothing for me to write." "Why, we are working, only nothing suits." So they talked. One tableau after another was suggested and rejected for excellent reasons. Some that they decided on and went to Mrs. Thorne for advice as to which would be the best one to act the part, had to be given up because Mrs. Thorne said decidedly that they were not suitable to have. "I know one thing we can have," said Nettie Hudson. "We can get up a lovely little Quaker girl, and your Rachel will be the very one to take the part." "Our Rachel!" repeated Maynie in dismay. "Why, she isn't in it." "Why not? She belongs to the class, and mamma says of course you will have her. She says it wouldn't be nice at all to leave her out." "Nonsense," said Maynie, and her cheeks glowed. "We don't leave her out, she is out. She doesn't go to school, nor go to parties with us, nor anything. Just because she happens to be in our class in Sunday school, we needn't have her in the tableau." "I think it would be real mean not to have her," spoke up Ida Warren. "She would like it, and she would make a nice tableau. And she is a good girl. You said yourself, Maynie Thorne, that you wished all the girls were as good as she." "Who said she wasn't good?" said Maynie crossly. "If we have to have all the good girls in the world, we shall not find characters enough for them all." Now I can't pretend to tell you all that was said on that subject, nor how all the tongues sometimes went at once, nor how some of them got quite beyond their owner's control and said words that they were sorry for. But I know this, in the midst of the argument, in the very hottest of it, the little clock on the mantel struck 5. "There," said Fanny, laying down her paper with a reproachful look all around, as if it must be somebody's fault. "Now it is 5 o'clock, and we must all go home, and we haven't done a thing, not a single thing, only quarreled. At this rate it will take us 1,000 years to earn an organ." I don't know how it was, but as they walked home in a little knot, those 4 girls who went a little way in the same direction, one of them said, "If I had been Maynie Thorne and pretended to all the things that she does, I wouldn't like to have got so angry as she did today." "Neither would I," said another. "And yet I don't know but one had been as angry as another, but it seemed to be natural to expect something better of Maynie Thorne." End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Maynie Thorne curled herself up in a discouraged little heap by the upper hall window. She was so disappointed in the afternoon. She had planned such a nice time. Everything was to have been arranged for the tableaux, and everybody was to have acted just right, herself among the number, and none of them had. "I don't see what is the matter," murmured Maynie. "I try and plan and mean to have good nice things, and they don't happen. Seems to me I don't get along any better than I did before." She meant then before she had joined the church. She had a fancy that everything would go all right after that, but everything didn't, and she was very much discouraged. There was a new person who belonged to the Thorne family now. That was Robert Thorne, her father's brother. Maynie couldn't quite decide about him. He was too young looking to be a man, and he was quite too large and nice looking to be a boy. Besides, he wasn't awkward nor shy, as boys of his size nearly always are, and she didn't know what to call him. He had come to be a clerk in her father's boot and shoe store. But the store closed at 6 o'clock, and he had the evening to himself. He had been there but a few days, and Maynie did not know whether, when he came to know her better, he would tease her or let her alone altogether. One of these two things was all she expected of him. His room opened from the front hall, and he sat there at this moment and heard Maynie's weary "Oh, dear me!" He sat still a minute, then he went out to the hall and sat down in the large chair near her. "What is the matter with us tonight?" he said brightly. "Seems to me we are not so very happy, and it is such a nice evening. That is a pity." Maynie looked up at him with a shy face. He didn't seem to be making fun of her. "Things didn't go nice," she said. "Would you mind telling me what was the matter with them?" She didn't know what there was in his voice or his face or something that made her begin at the beginning and tell him the whole story. She didn't mean to tell anything but a few little bits, but he kept asking questions until he got the account of the afternoon. "Do you suppose you could tell me why you didn't like the notion of having Rachel in the tableaux?" he asked her. Maynie looked down at her buttoned boots, and her face grew red. At last she said, I suppose it was because she was a poor little girl with no father and mother and works in the kitchen. Folks call her a servant, you know." "Do you like to hear true stories?" asked Uncle Robert. She looked surprised, but she said she did. "I want to tell you about a friend of mine," he said. "He was a minister, and once he wrote a letter to some Christian friends of his whom he thought were in danger of doing wrong. He told them some very plain things. Said he, 'If there should come to see you a man dressed splendidly, wearing his gold ring and his jewelry, and at the same time there should come a poor man, with common clothes on, and you should be very polite to the well-dressed man, and give him the best seat, and show him every kindness, and should leave the poor man standing, or let him get a seat wherever he could, or offer him one back in a corner, why then you are not being like the Lord Jesus Christ, for he loves the poor, and has chosen many of them for his dear children, and they will be rich when they get home to their Father's house. Remember when you do so that you are being selfish, partial to your own selves, and have let evil thoughts come into your hearts." "Did he really write that to them?" asked Maynie. "Indeed, he did, and the letter was printed, and hundreds of people read it, and tried to follow its teaching. You see, he was a very good man, and besides, the Lord Jesus told him what to say. The fact is, Maynie, he told this minister to write these words down in a letter so that Maynie Thorne, when she got thinking about it, might know what he thought." Maynie looked up timidly. "Do you mean that it is in the Bible?" she asked. Her uncle bowed his head. "Why, I never read it," she said. "I didn't know it said all about such plain things as that." "It does. It is the most wonderful book that ever was. It can help you about almost everything that you can think of." After a little he said, "I shouldn't wonder if I knew who was trying to have you follow after him this afternoon. Don't you believe I can guess?" "Satan?" she asked softly. "The very one. He is the busiest fellow, always on hand to see what mischief he can do. I suppose there was never a company of little girls who came together to have a nice time, that he didn't come to, and see just how much trouble he could make. And this is one of his very ways. I've seen him do it before. Now, wouldn't you like to get ahead of him?" "Yes," said Maynie, with a stamp of her foot, "I should." "Well, now, let me see if we can't think of a way. What tableau do you want to be in the most of any that you have?" "Why, I like the picture of the little girl setting the bird free best of any. She is dressed up so pretty and looks so splendid. And I could do that, because our Dickie will come and stand on my finger any time, and when I shake my finger a little, he will fly away to the plants." "I see," said Uncle Robert. "Now, what if you should give that very tableau to Rachel, and help dress her yourself, and make her look just as pretty as you possibly could? Dickie loves her, I see, and he will stand on her finger too. Don't you believe you would disappoint Satan then?"
"Yes," said Maynie, "I guess I should."
But she gave a little sigh. That girl was so lovely, and she had wanted to be all dressed up splendidly just once for fun. "Then," said Uncle Robert, "let us see what else we could do. What is the next prettiest one that you would like to have?"
"The Flower Queen is the next best, and I thought I should have to be that one because we have so many flowers."
"But if you should give the flowers to Rachel's little lame sister, and make her look as much like a flower queen as you possibly could, how would Satan like that, do you think?" For a whole minute Maynie was still, then she said,
"I don't believe he would like it a bit. Uncle Robert, I mean to do both of them."
"Good," said Uncle Robert. "Now just one more question. How do you think Jesus will like it?"
"He will like it," said Maynie, and her eyes shone.
"Yes, that he will. He has chosen the poor of this world, you know. What if Rachel and her little lame sister were both his children? How glad he will be to see you honor them." End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Great was the commotion among them when they began to understand that Rachel, Mrs. Thorne's kitchen girl, was actually to have the finest tableau in the whole set.
"Why, Maynie Thorne," they said, "how came you to?" "I didn't come to," said Maynie. "It wasn't I at all. It was because, well, I don't believe I can explain it to you." "Did anybody tell you you must?" "Course not," said Maynie with flashing eyes. "I did it because I wanted to spite somebody."
"To spite somebody?" they all said in a breath.
"Why, whom do you think you will spite by letting her be in the tableau? I'm sure we would just as soon have her as not, wouldn't we, girls?" said Nettie Hudson. "Of course," said Fanny Shepherd. "And besides, I shouldn't think you would want to spite any of us, Maynie."
Maynie drew a long breath.
"I knew you wouldn't understand," she said, and then dropping her voice a little, "It wasn't any of you, of course. It was just Satan. I knew he wouldn't like it a bit, because he never does like right things, and I didn't want to please him."
There wasn't the least answer made to this. They were all silent from astonishment. They looked at Maynie with a queer, shy feeling, almost of respect. It seemed such a new and, well, such a sober thing to do. They couldn't explain to themselves how they felt, but it seemed to make the work go better. There wasn't a bit of trouble that afternoon. If they had all entered into a pledge to spite Satan, they could hardly have done better. I am sure he must have sighed over it. Perhaps the most surprised one among them was Rachel. She was in the kitchen, hulling strawberries for tea, when Maynie went to see if she could come in the parlor a minute. "I suppose so," Mrs. Thorne said slowly. She wasn't quite certain whether she liked to have Rachel prinked up in her little girl's fine things, but then she had promised.
"Now hurry up," said Maynie eagerly. "Here is my puffed white dress, and the pink silk underskirt, and the sash, and bows, and all. We must see just how you will look. And Rachel, you must curl your hair the night before. Then it will look lovely."
Rachel looked from one to the other of the noisy girls, and then down at the glowing heap of finery on the bed, and said,
"I don't know what you mean. Do you want me to help dress you?" "No," said Maynie, laughing gaily. "We want to dress you. Here are my white kid slippers. Just see if they will fit."
Someway Maynie never felt quite so merry and light-hearted in her life. She expected to feel badly about giving up the prettiest tableau, but to her surprise she didn't at all. What fun they had dressing Rachel, and how wonderfully pretty she looked. When she was sent to the glass to get a peep at herself, her cheeks were as red as roses, and her eyes shone like 2 stars. It is a curious fact that she had never seen herself in a white dress before, and she hardly knew whether it was her truly self or a fairy. I haven't time to tell you all about the wonders of that tableau party, how they curled and frizzed and prinked and dressed themselves up, altogether too much for little girls. But after all, it did very well just for tableaux. Dicky, the bird, acted his part to perfection. He was very fond of playing with Rachel, and at the slightest shake of her hand he would flutter off, out of what looked enough like a window to be one, though it was only a sash draped with the muslin curtains that had been taken down for the wash. Maynie had herself combed and curled Rachel's hair, amazed and delighted to find that it needed no tins, or curling wads of any kind, but was only too glad to get a chance to flow in long, puffy curls. And Maynie, when she had dressed her to her complete satisfaction and arranged the tableau, slipped outside before the curtain, which, by the way, was made of 2 sheets basted together, was drawn back, and the murmurs of, "How very sweet that is!" and "Who is that little girl? She is very pretty. What a bright face she has!" gave her actually more pleasure than she ever remembered to have had before in her life out of such things. Uncle Robert came over to her just as the curtain fell, and said in a low tone, "I don't believe he likes this performance a bit." And Maynie looked up at him with laughing eyes and answered, "I'm sure he don't." Somebody who overheard them thought that was a queer thing to be pleased about, but they didn't understand it, you see. If there was joy over that tableau, what shall be said of lame Letty, the flower queen? That, you remember, was Rachel's lame sister. I can't begin to tell you how lovely she looked. In the first place, she had a sweet, sad little face, and it was framed with long yellow ringlets. When they made a wreath of white roses for a crown and put on her dainty white dress, which was little Carrie Shepherd's best, and trimmed it with flowers of bright colors, and fastened bouquets to her broad blue sash, and to her waist, and made a wand of a branch of great glowing lilies, they all pronounced her too sweet for anything. As for Rachel, some way she couldn't look at her without making the tears come. Uncle Robert was wonderfully interested in this tableau. He went himself to the woods and brought back a lovely log, covered with moss and lichen, and they strewed it with flowers and ferns and all the beauties of the woods, and used it for her throne. "It is perfectly splendid," Maynie said, clasping her hands as she stood back to look at it. "See if you don't think so. Here is a picture of her as she sat when the curtain was drawn." Altogether, that tableau party, with whose commencement Satan had so much to do, got taken entirely out of his hands, just by letting in a little unselfish love and kindness, 2 things that he doesn't like at all. "And the best of it all was," said Rachel, as she hugged her little lame sister in her arms that night, "that you and I were both in it." "Yes," snarled Satan to himself, "and if it hadn't been for that Maynie Thorne, you would have been out of it." End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 7. The next thing that they undertook was something very different from a tableau party. It came through an invitation from Maynie Thorne. Some of the girls discussed it on their way home from school after Maynie had left them. "It's real queer, anyhow," said Fanny Shepherd. "And just like Maynie's uncle. He acts like a minister. I thought he was going to be one, but Maynie says he isn't. She says he is only going to be a merchant. I don't but half want to go. It will be so solemn." "I want to go," Ida Warren said. "I like new things." After all, I am not sure that most of them would not have slipped out of it from shyness or some other reason. It was so queer to be invited to a kind of meeting. But you see, Maynie's uncle, being a wise young man, had two sides to his plan. Before the meeting, they were to have a game of croquet together on the lawn, and raspberries and cake in the arbor. Who wouldn't go to a meeting under such circumstances? So, on Thursday evening, the 6 girls were all together. Rachel had made the kitchen look neat and trim, and put on her new brown calico, and felt happy. She was in this good time too. How did it happen lately that there were so many good times for her? After the croquet and the cake, which was very simple and plain but tasted wonderfully good, they all went up to the wide, cool hall and sat down on the low window seats and the old-fashioned lounge, and were silent and shy, and wondered what would come next. Uncle Robert certainly played croquet splendidly. What else could he do? He pushed a footstool out from his room and sat down among them. "I want to have a little talk about things that we can know to a certainty if we want to," he said. "How many are there that you think of that you are sure about?" "Why, lots of things," Ida Warren said. "We know that we are all going to school tomorrow, and that on Saturday we are to have a picnic, and that Miss Wheeler is coming to teach in our room next year. Why, hundreds of things we know." "Ah, but I said things that you were sure of. How can you be sure of one of the things which you have mentioned? You don't know but the schoolhouse will burn down in the night, and it may storm all day on Saturday, and Miss Wheeler may die long before next term time. Don't you see?" "Oh, well," said Ida, taken aback. "If you mean such things, why then we aren't sure of anything." "Yes," Uncle Robert said, there were things of which he was sure, he knew they were to be so. He would show them some, if they would take these Bibles and find the places as he told them. Then he brought out 6 large, coarse print, commonly bound Bibles, and handed them around. Each one had a place to turn to. When all were found, Uncle Robert called on Maynie to read her verse. It was Job 30:23. "I know that thou wilt bring me to death, and to the house appointed for all living." The girls looked startled and sober when she read it. Sure enough, there was something of which they every one were certain. They talked about that house appointed for all. It did seem strange, as Uncle Robert spoke of it, that in all the people who had ever lived, they had never heard of any except those 2 grand men of Bible times, who had escaped dying. "Now," said Uncle Robert, "Ida will give us her verse. Let us see if there is anything else that we can know." Ida's verse was in Job 42:2. "I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee." Of course, that could mean no one but the great God. It was a solemn thing to think of his knowing their thoughts. Each one remembered some thought that she would not have the other to know. Think of God knowing it! But then, as Uncle Robert said, it had a wonderfully comforting side, to think that he could do everything. He asked if they were willing to agree that God had so much power, and after they had talked for a little about the wonderful things that he had done, they concluded it was safe to declare that he could do everything. Nora gave her verse next. It was the 6th verse of the 20th Psalm. I know that the Lord saveth his anointed. Quite a talk followed about who had a right to be called the Lord's anointed, because, since they were the ones to be saved, it was important to find out who they were. Uncle Robert had some verses about that, and the girls were ready to conclude, after he read them, that the Lord meant those who believed in him well enough to love him and ask his help. Rachel's verse was in the 56th Psalm, 9th verse. When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is with me. What a grand thing to know! Being sure that God is for us, then we have no enemies and can have none that can hurt us. Then Fanny Shepherd read from Ecclesiastes 8:12. I know that it shall be well with them that fear God. Nothing, it seems, then, can hurt those who belong to God. A blessed thing to know. They all agreed to that. Then they waited for Nettie Hudson's verse. It was in Isaiah 1:7. I know that I shall not be ashamed. Now, just think a minute, said Uncle Robert. We know, it seems, that we must die, but we know that God can do everything, so he can plan a way to help us out of that trouble, and if he knows even our thoughts, we can never be deserted because we are worse people than he expected we were. Then we know that he saves his children, so death proves to be nothing at all for his children to bear. Then we know that enemies are not to be feared, for he turns them back, and in fact, we know that nothing at all is to be feared, because he says it shall be well with his children. And finally, when we go up to the judgment and meet all the world, and every secret thing is talked about, we know that we shall have nothing to be ashamed of, that is, if we are his children. So Uncle Robert's verse was one more know. I know in whom I have believed. If they could all say that, then the other things followed. They had a wonderfully sweet and pleasant talk up in that great hall, and a tender prayer at its close, and they went home quietly in the soft dusk, and as they kissed one another good night, they said, I didn't think verses out of the Bible were so interesting. Each one of them had a little note to read when she reached her room. It said, Won't you try to know tonight whether you are the Lord's child or not? Are you willing to do without him when you know so much that is to come? End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. They were standing together on the piazza steps, Maynie Thorne and Fanny Shepherd. They had been to walk and to gather flowers, and now Fanny lingered for a little talk before she went home. How still and pleasant it is tonight, Fanny said. I like it so much. And do you see that bright gold-colored cloud up there, all fringed around with pink? That is a lovely cloud. How I would like to get near to one and see what it is like. Maybe the angels wear them for shawls. What an absurd idea, said Maynie. Well, I don't know. They wear clothes of some kind, don't you suppose? And what can their clothes be made of? I'm sure I don't know. I don't believe they have to think about them and make them anyhow. That's all the nicer then if they can have them without thinking about it and fussing over it and being troubled about what they cost. And of course they are pretty because everything is up in heaven. Mustn't it be nice to be where everything is pleasant and pretty? I declare I'd just like to go up there this minute and see it all. It did cross Maynie's mind to say, Then why don't you get ready to go so you will be sure to go there when you die? But she didn't say it. It seemed as though it would sound too sober or solemn for her to say, so she kept still. All the same, she wished that Fanny were a Christian, but she took care not to let her know it.
Maynie Thorne, don't you think it would be nice not to want to be wicked any more?
This was what Fanny said next, after being quiet for a few minutes. Maynie gave a little start. That seemed to her like very queer talk.
I don't want to be wicked now, she said slowly. Oh, well, I don't mean exactly wanting to, I guess. Yes, I do, too. Sometimes when I get real provoked at something and keep thinking about it, after a while I almost like to think about it, and I don't try to stop. It doesn't seem to me as though I wanted to be good-natured over it, as though I would stop being cross if I could.
Maynie had not a word to say to that, for the truth was she had felt just so herself, but she did not quite like to own it.
I think that is the meanest feeling about it, Fanny said. Worse even than the being ugly. To think of wanting to keep on with the ugly. I'd like to get where I'd never have that feeling any more. Anybody would think that you didn't want to live any longer, Maynie said, looking at her curiously. Oh, well, I don't talk so very often, but I think about it a good deal. I don't exactly want to die, I suppose. In fact, I know I don't. I'm awful afraid of dying. But if I were good, you know, felt ready, I'd just like to die. I know I should. I get real sick and tired of being cross and vain and peevish and all those things that girls are. We are all so, every one of us. I don't see a bit of difference.
Maynie's cheek flushed. If only she were different. If she had lived so that Fanny would know that there was a difference between them, how easy it seemed to her it would have been to talk to her. As it was, she almost made up her mind to say, "Oh, Fanny, I know I have not been good as I ought to have been, but I do love Jesus, and I do feel different about dying and about a good many things from what I used to. And I wish you would pray to Jesus, he would help you so quick." Her breath came quickly, and she almost said it. But then, what if Fanny should laugh? Wouldn't that be awful? So she kept still. How could she know that Fanny was saying in her sore little heart, "She can't feel any different from the rest of us. She can't feel that she has someone to help her, as they say Christians have, or she would tell me about it. And besides, she isn't truly much or any different from the rest of us." "Well," she said aloud, "I must go home. Mamma will think I am lost in the woods. There, that gold cloud is all gone, faded out to ugly gray. It can't be heaven up there, or it wouldn't turn such an ugly color." "Fanny Shepherd, what is the matter with you? I never heard you go on in such a way before." Fanny laughed. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe I'm crazy. Good night. I'll go home and try to sleep it off." After she went, Maynie stood in the doorway looking after her, and thinking how queerly Fanny acted. She seemed determined to talk about such strange things. "I do wish I had asked her if she wouldn't try to be a Christian," she said wistfully. "I wish I knew how to talk about such things, but she knows as much about them as I do after all." Then she went in. At the breakfast table next morning Uncle Robert came late and looking sober. "Your friend Fanny Shepherd is very sick this morning," he said, turning to Maynie. Then there were exclamations and inquiries, and Uncle Robert explained that he had seen the doctor coming from there at 6 o'clock, and found that he had been called in the night, and that Fanny was very sick indeed, delirious, and had been since midnight. "Will she die?" Maynie asked in a husky, trembling voice. "We will hope not," Uncle Robert said tenderly. but over and over in poor Maynie's heart were the words repeated,
"Oh, if I had only asked her to love Jesus!"
End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. They were standing together in the large hall of Mr. Shepherd's house. They were dressed in white, with black bows and sashes, and gloves, and each one had a bouquet of flowers, all white. Not 6 little girls, but 5. That other one, who had always been with them when they were together, was not far away. Indeed, she was in the great parlor, but to the girls it was as if millions of miles separated them, or more than that. No number of miles could stand for that strange, solemn journey that Fanny had taken, a journey which left only a still, cold body and motionless hands and feet. Fanny lay shrouded in flowers, in a beautiful white casket, and all her friends had gathered to the funeral. The girls in the hall huddled close together. They felt afraid to be separated. They did not know how to act. Their eyes were swollen with weeping, and their faces were very sad. Yet every once in a while they stole glances at themselves in their strange and handsome dresses, and whispered together a little about them, even then. One of them asked Maynie, in a whisper, if her mother made Rachel a present of her white dress and ribbons, and if the dress was just exactly like hers. And another of them whispered that she thought Ida's was just a very little short, that she had hers 2 inches longer than usual. Mamma thought it looked more suitable for such a time. It was not that any of them were heartless. It was simply that they, poor things, lived in homes where dresses and ribbons and gloves were very much talked about and planned over, and, of course, they had come to think that all such things were very important. There was a place arranged for them just at the foot of the white coffin, and they were to sing, "Tenderly lay her down to rest," and they were to ride in the carriage that followed the family friends, and they were to drop their bouquets on the sad, rude box that was to cover the beautiful white casket. It was an important position. Everyone was looking at them and talking about them, and they couldn't help knowing it. All these thoughts crowded in between the thought of Fanny and of death, and hushed some of the solemn thoughts. How can it be helped? Things mix up so. They were mixed in more minds than the children's. Weren't Miss Martin and her cousin wondering that Fanny's sister's intended wore such heavy crape on his hat? He couldn't do more if she was his own sister, they said. And the girls, listening, felt that all these things were very important. Miss Martin and her cousin were Sabbath school teachers. When it was all over, they went together in the handsome carriage back to Mr. Shepherd's, and from there they walked away in a sad little knot. Their eyes were very red now. They had wept bitterly over Fanny's grave. The flowers they threw in were all wet with tears. Now they were quiet and grave. "How we shall miss Fanny!" Ida said at last. "It doesn't seem possible that she won't be at school next week as usual, nor in Sunday school, nor anywhere. Oh dear!" "It's awful," said Carrie, shivering, "and I can't help feeling how strange it is that the sun keeps on shining, and everybody acts just as usual. It seems as though everything ought to look black and gloomy. I wish they had let us wear black dresses. I'm sure we feel more like that." And then she looked down on her handsome white dress, and couldn't help thinking that it was very pretty, and that black ribbons and gloves looked lovely with it. This gave her a new thought. "Girls, don't you think it would look well for all of us to go to Sunday school next Sunday, dressed just like this? It would seem respectful, you know." Yes, they all agreed. Only Rachel. She was quiet, because of the softened feeling, perhaps. They all noticed her stillness, and Ida said, "You like that, don't you, Rachel? I should think you would. Your dress is very becoming." And she whispered to Carrie that it was such a change from the faded calicoes. "I don't know," Rachel said slowly. "Oh, why, yes, if Mrs. Thorne thinks best. But it is strange to wear black after all. Don't you know, girls, that Fanny was so happy? Did you hear how she said that if she had known what a beautiful thing it was to have Jesus love her, she wouldn't have wasted so much time? And then, just as she was dying, she said, 'Oh, look, I see him. Oh, mother, he loves me.' Just think how happy she is. I suppose if we could see her, we should be so happy for her that we wouldn't like our black ribbons at all." "Oh, I don't know," Ida said. "People always talk so when they are dying, you know. Of course she is happy, but then I can't help thinking that dying is dreadful. Of course I shan't feel so when the time comes, but I do now." Rachel looked at Maynie Thorne. Surely something ought to be said. Shouldn't she say it? No, Maynie was still. She didn't know what to say. "People don't all die that way," Rachel said at last, very timidly. "Maynie's uncle said that Fanny was awfully afraid at first. She said she couldn't die, that she didn't know Jesus. She said nobody had told her about him, and he was afraid she would die feeling that way. Would not that have been dreadful? Oh, I am so glad she knew Jesus before she went to him. Dying without him must be dreadful, Ida." Rachel's face was glowing, and she was trembling so she could hardly speak. She was a timid little thing, and she was not used to talking freely with these girls about anything. They were all still for a minute. Maynie was trying to think what she could say to show that she thought just as Rachel did, when Ida exclaimed, "Oh, girls, if here isn't a rip in these new gloves! I don't believe they are going to wear well at all. Isn't it a shame? I wanted to wear mine with my new velvet cloak next winter. Are you going to have a black cloak, Maynie?" And Carrie said in the same breath, "Say, girls, don't you believe these sashes will trim our hats nicely? We won't need black sashes, you know. And I think they would look lovely on beaver hats. They are going to wear long ends next winter. Miss Merrivale told mamma so." Then some way all four of these little girls, on their way home from that long goodbye to the sixth one, went to talking eagerly about beaver hats, and seal brown winter suits, and navy blue suits, and I don't know what. It wasn't that they did not love Fanny. It was because they were so used to talking about sashes and dresses and hats together that they didn't feel the least bit of shyness about it. Not one of them forgot that quiet little grave for a moment. Not one but remembered that she must die, and shrank from it, only Maynie and Rachel. They knew the way. They could have shown the others. But none of them had been taught to talk over these things as freely and as naturally as they talked about the clothes for those pretty bodies made of dust. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. For a whole week there had been great doings at Grandpa Dunlap's. They were getting ready for Thanksgiving. All the children and grandchildren, and uncles and aunts, and cousins, and the minister with his family, were to dine at Grandma Dunlap's. Maynie Thorne and her mother had been out to Grandpa's 3 or 4 days, helping, and had only come home the day before to see things and get dressed for the feast. Oh, yes, and to go to church. I almost forgot that part. Such times as Maynie had had! just the sort of work that she liked to help at. Raisins to stone, and citron to slice, and eggs to beat to a foam, and sugar to roll, and jellies to select from the rows and rows of jars on the shelf. She had run hither and thither and been a real help, Grandma said. But this morning I can't begin to tell you how slowly she moved. "Maynie, bring my basket from the upper clothes-press shelf," said her mother. Maynie went, but she was gone a good while. On the way she stopped before her mother's bureau and raised the shade and stood on a footstool and took a good look at herself. "How long you were!" her mother said. "One would think you would be spry this morning. We shall not be ready in time. Run down cellar and get a jar of those sweet pickles. I promised your grandma I would bring her some for the table." But Maynie stopped in the kitchen and dried the knives while Rachel went for her, and all the time she looked so sober and moved so slowly that at last her mother said, "Maynie Thorne, what is the matter? I declare I'm all out of patience with you. I should think you might try to be helpful to your mother as well as your grandmother." Then Maynie turned away quickly and took up the corner of her white apron and wiped away a tear. What troubled Maynie? At last it came out. She appeared in her mother's room half an hour after she had been sent to dress, with her everyday brown merino and white apron still on. "Aren't you dressed yet?" said her mother. "Why, what in the world have you been about?" What she had been about was sitting curled up in a heap on the rug before the fire, thinking, but she didn't say so. She only said, "Mother, I think I ought to tell you that that is, it might be that you would think I oughtn't to go to grandma's today. I'm not quite sure, but I think my throat feels just a little sore." Mrs. Thorne dropped the lace ruff she was gathering for her black silk dress and turned around. "For pity's sake," she said, and her voice sounded harsh to Maynie. "I wonder if you are going to begin with your throat again just as you did last winter. Turn to the light and let me see it. Dear me, what a vexation! Yes, of course it is sore. No, not much. Just enough to put you in a strip of red flannel behind the stove. You have been very careless in some way, or you wouldn't have a sore throat such beautiful weather as this is. No, of course you can't go out. Your father would think we were all crazy." Now, wasn't this pretty hard on poor Maynie, who had been struggling all the morning with her conscience? Trying to make herself believe that her throat wasn't sore, that she only imagined it. Or if it was sore the least bit in the world, it wasn't worth noticing. How very hard it had been for her to listen to the voice which had almost made her crazy, whispering all the morning, "You ought to tell, you ought to tell." Now, if mother would only say, "Poor child, how sorry I am, but you were a good girl to come and tell me." Mrs. Thorne was sorry, just as sorry as she could be. It almost made her sick to think of poor Maynie's disappointment. But she didn't think to say so. Maynie turned away without another word, but with the big tears dropping now on her white apron, and she didn't wipe them away. Mrs. Thorne came after her pretty soon and asked her if she felt sick, and said never mind, there were other Thanksgivings coming, and that grandma would be sure to send her a piece of everything nice, and that Rachel would stay and keep her company and wait on her. Here was another thing. Maynie gave a little start and wondered if all the hard things in the world were to be done today. It would be nice to have Rachel with her quiet, pleasant ways and cheerful face, but Rachel was to go to grandma's to the Thanksgiving dinner. What an awful trial it would be for her to stay. She thought about it only a minute. She was not by nature a selfish girl. Then she said resolutely, "No, mother, Rachel mustn't stay.
Grandma has taught her just what to do to help wait on the table, and she will miss her." "Well," said Mrs. Thorne after a little, "I don't know but you will be just as well off with her away. You will have a quiet time to read. I'll ask your uncle to get some new books for you from the library." Aunt Maynie felt as if she would have liked to say, "I shan't have nearly such a nice time without her. I want her to stay awfully." But she didn't say it. She knew then that Rachel would have been sure to have stayed. Then the bustle of preparation went on, but Maynie wasn't in it. She curled herself into the big rocker and tried to keep back the tears while people were looking at her, promising herself a great big cry when they were all gone. If she had only felt sick, she could have borne it better, she thought. But it did seem so silly to be left behind just because her throat was swollen a little. She kept swallowing to see if the lump wasn't gone, and wished that she had a throat like other people's that didn't make such a fuss about being sore. Satan, too, came with his share of trouble for her. "You might as well have kept still," he said. "It wouldn't have hurt you a bit to wrap all up and ride to your grandmother's this nice day, and you could have stayed all night. Nobody would ever have been the wiser about the lump in your throat. And now you have gone and worried your mother all for nothing." This was the mood he had gotten her into when the family finally drove from the door. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of 6 Little Girls by Pansy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11. There was a curious noise about the house, a banging of doors and much stamping of snow, and a rushing to and fro in the lower hall, and much laughter that people seemed trying to keep from bursting out. Maynie Thorne, upstairs in the sitting room, wondered what in the world could be the matter. She went to the door twice and called, "Jane," just as loudly as she could, but received no sort of answer. Jane was the girl who used to live with them years ago, and who had come to spend the day as soon as it was discovered that Maynie couldn't go to grandma's. "I suppose it is her children running back and forth," Maynie said, as she waited a little and then went back to her chair and her book. "What a hubbub they make!" And then she sighed a little. It seemed that everybody was having a nice, merry time except herself. She was very dull and forlorn. Her book seemed stupid, though it was one that she had been wanting this long time. She found that she didn't want to read it on Thanksgiving Day. At least, she didn't like to keep at it all the time. The weary morning had passed, and the afternoon was dragging itself away. She had read and sewed a little, and knitted on her breakfast shawl a little, and lounged from couch to armchair a great deal, and imagined what they were doing at grandma's. It was so disagreeable and yet so fascinating to say, "Now they are just sitting down to dinner, and all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren and Dr. Seward's children are at the side table, and my seat is empty." Dear me, would the day never go away? To make matters more trying, she kept swallowing and swallowing, and sometimes could not be certain that her throat was sore at all. It would have been a positive comfort to have felt it hurting her every time she tried it, for then she would have known that it had been sensible to stay at home. "Why don't Jane come up and see me?" she wondered as the afternoon waned. "She must have got the work all done long ago. I should think she might bring her sewing and sit with me. She might let the children come up, too. It would be better than no company at all." She went to the hall door again and called louder than before, but the bustle was louder than ever, and nobody made any answer to her.
She shut the door with a little slam, and with a hurt sort of feeling that she was entirely deserted and that everybody in the world could get along without her and have a good time. The lump in her throat began to feel large now, and it was by constant swallowing that she kept the tears in her eyes from falling on the bright-colored wools in her lap. She had had a dreary little dinner all by herself. Jane had done her best, had broiled a bit of chicken and made toast and opened a glass of grape jelly all for her, but she had felt as though she couldn't eat a mouthful, she was so lonesome and dreary. She had made a brave trial of it for Jane's sake, but very little had been accomplished. Hark! Somebody was coming upstairs at last. What a tramping they made! It must be Jane and all her children, Maynie said, sitting up and brushing back her hair and trying to look cheerful. A little tap at her door that did not sound like Jane's knuckles, and then it was thrown open. "Uncle Robert!" she exclaimed in astonishment. And then there was a giggle behind him, and then a shout, and in they rushed. An army of them, Ida and Nora Warren, and Nettie Hudson, and Rachel herself in her new merino dress made out of Maynie's outgrown one, and after her trooped the grandchildren and nieces and nephews and the minister's children. "Here we are at your service, ma'am," said Uncle Robert, as the amazed Maynie slid out of her big rocker and stood looking at the gay group. "A Merry Thanksgiving to you, and we would like to take supper with you, if you please." What a time they had! What became of Maynie's sore throat and blues? She forgot them both. What a supper they had! Hadn't Grandma entered into Uncle Robert's plan with all her heart? Can anyone imagine what she did not put into that great clothes basket that rode along in the cutter with Tim, the hired man, following the great hay sleigh loaded full with happy boys and girls going to make a frolic for Maynie? Jane was in the secret too, and she had been working hard ever since her bit of a boy brought her a note to expect a houseful. No wonder she hadn't time to take her sewing and visit Maynie. What do you think of the candy pull that they had in the evening, after the grand supper was gotten out of the way? How many nuts do you suppose Uncle Robert cracked, and how many meats did they pick out to drop into the candy? What royal candy it was! Just imagine the time they had pulling some of it, trying to make it as yellow as Maynie's hair. Oh, the fun! Grandma and the old people, sitting comfortably around the open fireplace in the great old parlor, hadn't the least idea of the way to enjoy themselves. Nobody knew except those children and Uncle Robert. "Isn't he just the grandest man?" whispered Ida Warren to Maynie, as he dodged this way and that, helping first one and then another. "I do think, Maynie Thorne, you have just the splendidest uncle that ever was born. I've got a half dozen of 'em, and I don't care as much for any of 'em as I do for yours. What do you suppose makes him so different from other people?" Now Maynie had her own thoughts about that very thing. The question was, should she tell them or keep them to herself? She had had such thoughts before and kept them to herself and been sorry afterward. She remembered that evening when she stood in the doorway for the last time with Fanny Shepherd, and the things she thought of that she did not say, and spoke quickly while her courage lasted. "I truly think, Ida, that the reason he is so different from other people is, that he loves Jesus so much he forgets all about himself and only tries to please Jesus." "But, well then, why, Maynie, what can there be in his leaving the company and coming out here and getting us children and making fun for us all the evening that has had anything to do with pleasing Jesus?" "Why, it's being unselfish, you know, thinking more of other folks' fun than he did of his own.
I suppose Uncle Robert would have liked better to sit down and talk with the rest. I know he likes to go to grandma's, and she just loves him with all her heart." "Well," Ida said, after a long pause, "it's splendid anyway. I wish there were some more people like him. I just wish I were myself. I say, Maynie Thorne, you are a Christian. Why don't you be like him?" "I'm trying," Maynie said softly. And Ida looked at her with a sober face, and began to have a dawning notion that she was. "You are different, that's so," she said, aloud and thoughtfully. Then she went back to her candy. There was a little song in Maynie's heart. She had witnessed a little bit for Jesus. It wasn't so hard as she supposed it would be. Ida didn't laugh. She felt stronger. "It is just a beautiful day after all," she said to herself. Another sweet thought made her face grow very bright. "I wonder," she said, "did the Lord Jesus send them all here because he saw how lonely I was and how hard I was trying? Of course he did, or they wouldn't have come. Uncle Robert always does just as he says." End of chapter 11. End of Six Little Girls by Pansy.